Hi, I'm Anne Gaviola. Welcome to the Peak on Global, where we break down what's trending in the business world and what you need to know to stay ahead of the curve. Joining me now is Brett Chang from the Peak podcast. Welcome, Brett.
Hey, Anne, great to be with you as always.
Let us talk about nuclear energy because apparently it's making a comeback. So there are signs of this all around the world, and this is pretty interesting for an energy source that was on the decline before Russia's war in Ukraine and Europe's energy crisis were, both catalysts for this renewed interest and investment in this suddenly very en vogue power source. What do you think of all this, Brett?
So nuclear power got a bad rap in the 90s and early 2000s. So between Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island and Fukushima, all these disasters, there is a stigma attached to nuclear power that thankfully is going away because a lot of experts look at nuclear power and they think this is the only way for us to really decarbonize our electrical grids. And that's exactly what's happened in Ontario. The only way that we were able to get away from coal was through nuclear and hydro. And so it's great to see nuclear in a resurgence now. And like you mentioned, many governments in Europe are looking at their power grids and thinking, how do we make up for that lack of Russian gas? They've been cut off effectively from Russian gas, and they're going to nuclear as a great alternative to that. And I think it's probably good for the world.
Yeah, there's renewed investment and interest in the U.S. and Canada as well. I do want to say this is a very serious topic, but can we agree that we can't be friends with people who pronounce it nuclear? That to me is as bad as saying espresso. Just saying.
Well, it's like someone saying tomato. That's just not how you say the word.
I mean, we can agree to disagree on that one, and we'll probably come back to this one because I think it's a real developing story and a trend. Now, switching gears, new this week, most employers in Ontario are required to have a policy detailing how and why they electronically monitor, also known as spying or keeping tabs on their employees. So this is a great idea in my books in terms of transparency, but zero detail that I've been able to find on what kind of teeth these new rules have, and I've been told, yeah, we just kind of have to wait and see.
Well, I think the first thing is important to recognize that this isn't really new for the workforce. If you were working in the service industry, for example, there are likely cameras that were already monitoring you. Who this is new for are kind of that professional class who are behind laptops most of their days. And there's this new software, whether it's keystroke monitoring or eye tracking, which is trying to determine what the productivity level of the workforce is like. And this new policy is going to force employers to now disclose what exactly they're doing to track their workforce, and at least provide some transparency to their employees so that they know what's actually happening behind the scenes. Because in many cases, employees are blind to this sort of behavior. So I think it's a great first step. But as you mentioned, Anne, there's not a lot of teeth in terms of what they can do to enforce or restrict companies from doing this. It's simply a policy forcing them to disclose it.
Yeah, you just kind of have to show and tell. And you mentioned, you described it as a good starting point. My question is this. So is this another case of the technology already being miles ahead of government policy? Because what we know, as you mentioned, the pandemic, it definitely accelerated the work from home trend. And the tech, as you also mentioned, it already exists to allow companies to get really granular in terms of their tracking. So things like your eye movement as you're sitting there and working away, keystrokes, how much typing are you doing? In addition to those garden variety kind of Big Brother type cameras, is this a case of too little, too late?
I absolutely think so. We've seen this time and time again, whether it was ride sharing or it was home sharing and the whole sharing economy. Governments are usually slow to adapt to changing technologies. But I think what actually is kind of important, and there's a broader trend here, is that a lot of companies ultimately, in my opinion, will move away from this. I think the productivity of a worker based on the amount of words that they type is not indicative of their performance in the company. And I think a lot of companies are going to realize that. And so while some of them had started to do this during COVID when everybody was working from home, I wouldn't be surprised if more actually ended up moving away from it, which would be a great outcome here. But I think the policy is a good step. We have kind of full disclosure now of what's exactly happening. I think what we really need to keep an eye on, what government should keep an eye on, is how big this trend becomes and how they can adapt to it.
Yeah, I think that's also a lot of data that's being generated, and I'm not sure that we have kind of the people and maybe the processes in place to accurately monitor all of that data with these new kind of data points coming in. So we'll have to keep an eye on that one too. Let's move to our third topic because there are a lot of reasons to talk about Elon Musk this week. I'm going to pick one. Let's talk about his foray into the world of perfume. It sounds strange for me to say it as well. His newest concoction is a perfume that's called Burnt Hair. It's for men, women, all genders. He claims to have made $2 million in sales within the first 24 hours of this being available to the public. If this is a joke, and that's what it feels like, what's the punchline? Is it kind of like that flamethrower debacle? I don't get it, Brett.
Well, the joke stems from his name, Musk. And so he thought he had to create a perfume. It was only natural for him to create a perfume. But this would go perfectly alongside your Boring Company hat, the flamethrower that you mentioned. Elon Musk is a man of many interests. I think this is just one more funny, at least to him, thing to do. And look, important thing to remember is that Elon Musk has hundreds of thousands, if not millions and millions of diehard fans who I'm sure will be happy to buy and wear this perfume. And so I wouldn't be surprised if, a year from now when it ships, that you'll start smelling burnt hair all over the place.
Didn't realize you had to wait that long for this to ship out. But I think one of the key takeaways, the bottom line for me is, okay, so the richest man ever to walk the earth has a sizable lead in manufacturing cars of the future, space exploration. He's probably going to own Twitter, which you and I have discussed as being, a very important platform in the realm of social media. He's working on creating an army of robots, and apparently he can shill Dogecoin and perfume. I wanted to end on a cheerful note, but now I'm feeling a little bit less than great about our collective prospects for the future. What do you think?
Well, to be a bit more generous, Elon Musk, some of the greatest inventors of our time, they've had their own, let's just say, eccentric interests. And I feel like he is well within that realm. But yeah, look, it's a complicated picture. There's good, there's bad. Elon Musk, he is a divisive figure, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
Yeah, absolutely. He is a divisive, polarizing, and I'm all for eccentric people and eccentricities. But this to me feels like, consolidation of lots and lots of power. But we're going to leave it there. Have a great rest of your weekend. Thank you as always for your time and your insight, Brett.
Thanks, Anne. Always great to be with you.
And you can get all your daily business news with the Peak Daily Podcast. It's available for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you find your favorite podcasts.